So today I wanted to talk about Packers left tackle David Bakhtiari and the impact that he will have on the salary cap for the Green Bay Packers going forward as we enter another offseason with some salary cap issues. We saw last year where the Packers were severely in the hole for the salary cap. They restructured a ton of contracts. Russ Ball did a lot of work last season in order to get the Packers under the salary cap. And when doing so, you're just pushing money out to the future, and that's kind of putting the Packers in the same exact situation for this offseason. And David Bakhtiari is one of those massive contracts that everyone is currently looking at and going, okay, what are the Packers going to do with that? So today, I wanted to break everything down with David Bakhtiari and his contract. So we can all agree that it has definitely been a shaky year for David Bakhtiari, but unlike 2021, Bakhtiari actually played in some games this year. He was finally returning from that long ACL recovery and probably still is recovering in some shape or form of that ACL. Then, of course, going through the appendectomy, which I've given my thoughts on this many times. It's not related to football. I didn't understand the hatred towards David Bakhtiari for missing a few games with an appendectomy when it wasn't even a football injury. It's just a bad stroke of luck. It's not his fault. And just in general, everyone's body heals differently, so it is what it is. But Bakhtiari ended up starting in 11 out of the 17 total games in 2022. But the thing about it was, when Bakhtiari was in the game, he looked like his former self. It's not like he's coming back from these injuries and not playing well. Every time he was in the game at left tackle, he played really, really well this year. Now, Brian Gutekunst has already gone on record pretty much saying that he expects David Bakhtiari to return for 2023. I would hope so. We're hopeful that he's kind of cleared some of those injury hurdles, Gutekunst said when asked whether Bakhtiari will return for the 2023 season, which makes sense since Bakhtiari is under contract until the 2024 season. But the argument here isn't, okay, is he under contract? It's more so what you're paying him under that said contract. I've always been a really big David Bakhtiari supporter, even through the entirety of his ACL recovery. It is hard to recover from a torn ACL. I think we take it very lightly to see these athletes coming back, 9-10 months after tearing a very crucial ligament in your knee and then going on to a full force activity such as football. I think it's very hard to do. A lot of people in common day will tear something like their ACL and have trouble walking up the steps for the rest of their lives. Yes, these are athletes. They've been training their entire life, and you do expect them to come back in some way, shape, or form over at least like 12 months and end up playing again. But it's even harder for a bigger player such as Bakhtiari, who has to, move 300-pound players every single play. And over the last year, I always saw tons of comments on my YouTube and on Twitter that David Bakhtiari will never play another game again. This was before he came back this year. Oh, David Bakhtiari needs to be gone. They need to get rid of him. He's not worth it. And I just simply do not agree with that. Obviously, he came back, and when he is back, he's playing at a high level, and I think he can definitely continue that. It seems like the knee is finally not really an issue anymore after the appendectomy where he had 3 weeks off. He actually didn't need any rest days during the practice weeks for the rest of the season, which is a really good sign. Yeah, he was still on the practice report and was limited every day because there's no need to push him if they don't need to. But I think that's finally starting to become a non-issue for David Bakhtiari, and moving forward, I think it will become a non-issue. So then at this point, and the point of this video, the issue now lies with the contract of David Bakhtiari. When signed, this contract was extremely backloaded, which pretty much means, okay, we're not going to pay you too much at the beginning of the contract. All the money that we agreed upon, it's going to be pushed to the back of the contract. We'll worry about it later. A lot of teams do this as the salary cap increases every year, so therefore you have more money to pay the more higher amounts in later years. And not to mention, the Green Bay Packers have already restructured his deal once, which even pushes more money out to the future. And the restructure in 2021 actually increased his cap hit every single year by $2.7 million, right around that mark for the next 3 years on his contract. And 2023 and 2024 are his highest cap hits by far. So if we go ahead and look at David Bakhtiari's contract, we see it started in 2020 with that $16 million cap hit. In 2021, he did a contract restructure, which pushed money out. So that's why his cap number was low at a 10.9. This year in 2022, his cap hit, again, manageable, pretty low, a $13.7 million. The problem is this is an extremely backloaded contract, as I mentioned, and when we go to 2023, it more than doubles up to a $28.8 million cap hit, or 12.7% off the cap. And in 2024, it gets even higher, a $33 million cap hit, or 12.9% off the cap. And you might be sitting here thinking that is definitely not worth it. There's no way the Packers can pay that amount for David Bakhtiari. But the truth is, when you look at left tackles in this league, the best ones are paid like this. If we look at Trent Williams, who is the highest paid tackle in the NFL, his 2023 cap hit, right around where Box is, $27 million. Then it jumps to 28, then 30, then 34. And then if we go to the third highest paid tackle, which is Laramie Tunsil, we see in 2023, it jumps all the way up to a $35 million. So it's kind of becoming the norm for left tackles to get paid this much and to have extremely high cap hits, as they are one of the most important positions, maybe the most important outside of quarterback on the offense. So it's not just the Green Bay Packers and David Bakhtiari with this issue. It's a lot of teams that have high-end left tackles in the NFL paying a lot of money. All right, so now you might ask, well, what can you do? What can you do to lower that cap number? Because it is always possible to lower the cap numbers. As we saw last year, Russ Ball doing all that work, restructuring contracts. And I'll mention again, restructuring is not the greatest idea for the future. But as I said earlier, cap space goes up every single year. So it kind of evens out for some of the deals that you restructure. But nonetheless, it's not great for the future. But if you're going to be rebuilding in 3-4 years, it's not that big of a deal. So for David Bakhtiari, we see right now we're on 2023. And as we saw earlier, that $28.8 million cap hit. Cutting David Bakhtiari pre-June 1st is simply not an option. That would only save 5.7 off the cap and incur $23.1 million dead cap. So he would still be a $23 million cap hit in 2023 when you didn't have him on the team. It makes no sense. So if we went to, say, trade post June 1st, this would be a cut or a trade. This would be a post June 1st designation. Now, the only problem with that is you got to carry his $28 million cap hit through the new league year, where at that point you have to be under the cap. If you're not, you'll obviously be heavily fined and there'll be a lot of issues. So you would have to carry that $28 million until June 1st, which can create a lot of other issues with other contracts trying to get under the cap. But this is an applicable idea. The Packers, technically could trade David Bakhtiari post June 1st. I don't think they would cut him. I think that would be super silly, and I just don't see that happening. But technically speaking, they could trade David Bakhtiari post June 1st. As you see here, his cap savings would be $17 million. And the dead money would be 11.5. So if they were to do that, his cap number for 2023 would still be 11.5 million, but they'd be off the books for that 17.2 million and all of that. So I don't think that's going to happen. As Goot said earlier, he expects him to be back in 2023. He's been playing at a high level, which we'll go over all of his stats here in a second. And I think you need David Bakhtiari in this team. Whether or not it's Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love, you need a top tier left tackle to protect your quarterback. So what I think is going to happen is a restructure, which a max restructure for David Bakhtiari would save them $7.8 million off the cap in 2023. So doing this, you're pushing base salary to prorated bonuses, and you're also taking non-prorated bonuses and putting them to prorated bonuses and stretching them out over the course of the contract. The problem is David Bakhtiari only has 1 year after this. So if they were to do a max restructure, yes, it lowers his 2023 cap hit to $20.8 million, a lot more manageable. If you go to 2024, it raises it up to $41 million, which would be higher than Aaron Rodgers. So what is most likely going to happen, I'm 99.9% sure, is they're going to restructure David Bakhtiari's contract and add a couple void years on the deal. Void years basically allow you to push bonus out further. So David Bakhtiari, yes, he's only signed to 2024, but this would allow you to push some of that prorated bonus out a couple more years, evening it out a little bit more, making 2024 not as bad. The problem with that then is in 2025 and 2026, if they add 2 void years, you're paying for David Bakhtiari if he's on the team or not, no matter what. To give you a quick example of this, let's look at Adrian Amos's contract. His last year was 2022. As you see here, the Packers had added 4 void years last year to push that bonus out. As you can see, $2.2 million every single year, except for the last is $1.1 million of stretched out bonus. What that does then is in 2023, when Adrian Amos is not on the team anymore, unless the Packers re-sign him, it takes all that remaining bonus and puts it as a cap hit on that next year that he's not on the team, and that's a void year, so $7.9 million. So the Packers are going to be paying Adrian Amos $7.9 million off the cap if he's not on the team. The weird thing is, if the Packers extend Adrian Amos, they can actually lower that cap hit for him being on the team, rather than it would be higher if he was off the team. So the same goes for David Bakhtiari. If they're going to add void years, which I definitely believe they will if they do restructure, because that cap hit in 2023, $41 million, is simply not going to work. What that basically creates is an issue down the line where you could be paying for a player that's not on your team. And the issue with trading David Bakhtiari is then you're without a true starting left tackle. Yes, Zach Tom filled in and played well at left tackle when he needed to. I just feel Zach Tom's true position is at one of the guard spots or right tackle on this football team, and I do expect him to start in the near future, and I also want him to start in the near future. And then you also have Josh Nijman, who is a restricted free agent, which will be tendered with a second-round tender next year. I definitely see the Packers bringing him back, which he can also play left tackle, but he's not the best at it. I think he's a better right tackle. Just in general, I just feel you need a top-tier left tackle in the NFL nowadays, and David Bakhtiari is that. And although David Bakhtiari is 32 years old, you just don't get rid of one of the better left tackles in the league. For example, Andrew Whitworth played until last year when he was 40 years old and was still #1 in pass block grade in the entire NFL for all tackles. So tackles can definitely play longer into their career than a lot of other positions. David Bakhtiari allowed 0 sacks this year and only 10 pressures. Now, given he did miss some games, so obviously his snap count's a little lower. It's right around 600. But the only tackle with less pressures and 0 sacks with over 500 snaps was Lane Johnson, who had an excellent year. So David Bakhtiari, by all accounts, besides the games he missed, had an excellent year. The fact is, David Bakhtiari can still play at a high level for years to come, in my opinion, and you need to keep him on the team to protect your quarterback. So that's what I think they'll do. They'll restructure David Bakhtiari's contract, add a couple void years, making it a little bit more manageable for this year and next year as well. But I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think the Packers should do with David Bakhtiari? Do you think they should just trade him, try to cut the ties with that contract as soon as possible, maybe get some of the money back, but then have a hole at left tackle? Or do you think they should do what I think they'll do, a restructure, add a couple void years, kind of like what they've been doing with a lot of other contracts the past couple of years? Just let me know down in the comments below. Appreciate everyone watching this video. If you guys are new here and you want more Packers analysis, I do contract breakdowns, everything salary cap, free agency, and draft. We're going to get into the draft here shortly, as it is officially draft season. I also want to give a quick shout out to the Minnesota Vikings. One and done team, as we all expected, that fraud team. I mean, come on. There is no way the Vikings were going to go into the playoffs and win a playoff game. The Packers didn't even make the playoffs and embarrassed them 2 weeks ago. So it's just funny how hype these Vikings fans were. Oh, they're going to go to the Super Bowl. They're such a good team. That was never the case. Just never the case. But that about does it for this one. Catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching, and as always, go Pack Go.